Let's speak now with the Labour MP for Aberavon, Stephen Kinnock, who joins us now. Good evening to you.
Hello, good evening.
We obviously don't know the exact details of what's in the deal, but there are some ideas of what's in it. What's your reaction to it so far?
Well, my understanding is there's two big chunks to this deal. One is the withdrawal agreement, which of course deals with citizens' rights and the financial settlement and also the Northern Irish border issue. There's a tremendous amount of detail in that. It runs apparently to 500 pages. And then there's this political declaration about the long-term future relationship after the transition period, which my understanding is that that's just going to be a very woolly, pretty empty, meaningless, what I would call a truckload of fudge. And that, I think, is the fundamental problem, that political declaration about the long-term future relationship, if it's just full of meaningless platitudes, we can't vote for it. We can't go into the division lobbies to make decisions and vote on what is the most important issue in British politics since the Second World War, many would say, based on what we would call a blindfolded Brexit, where we don't actually know what we're voting for. From the reports and from what I'm hearing and picking up, that seems to be the real weakness, the Achilles heel of this deal. And if that's the case, then I certainly won't be voting for it.
What about the Achilles heel in the Labour Party, though? Because former Labour leader Tony Blair today was saying it's time that Labour took a stand on this, and that if we can't get an agreement with all the factions, it's time to go for a second vote. And there have been very mixed messages coming out of the Labour Party and mixed messages coming from Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah, I've been saying for 2 years now consistently that a European economic area-based Brexit is the best way to leave the European Union. It respects the result of the referendum. It keeps us very, very close as full participation in the single market, but it takes us out of the political institutions. We leave the EU, but we leave the EU without wrecking the British economy. It also solves the Irish border issue, and it's the only Brexit that has a chance of reuniting our deeply divided country. My concern about the People's Vote campaign is if we have another referendum, we're once again saying Parliament isn't capable of taking these decisions, and we're handing it back to the people, and we know it will be deeply, deeply divisive. We already have a deeply divided country, young against old, city versus town, graduates versus non-graduates, and we know that another referendum would just drive those divisions even deeper.
Even if no one can agree, so even if this goes to a vote, it's thrown out, Parliament doesn't vote for it, we're staring at a no-deal Brexit. Is that really what most people voted for?
Well, I don't think that no deal is possible. It won't happen. I sit on the Brexit Select Committee. We've had hours and hours of evidence from every government department, from every part of business, from lawyers and doctors, you name it.
It's hard to see how we could get a deal at this point, though, that will get past Parliament.
Well, if Parliament doesn't approve anything, there will have to be an extension of Article 50 in order to instruct the government to go back and negotiate a deal on different terms that does command a majority in Parliament. I'm working with a cross-party group, Labour and Tory MPs and others, on putting together an amendment which would instruct the government to go back and negotiate a Brexit based on the European Economic Area. I've always believed that there is a majority in Parliament. Don't forget that 76 Labour MPs voted for this in June, the biggest rebellion against the whip in Labour Party history. So there's a strong appetite. A number of Conservative MPs are now signing up to this idea, and I think that there's a consensus across the House that if this deal is rejected, the only way to navigate through this, because I don't think there's a majority in the House for a people's vote. I don't think there's a majority in the House for a general election, in spite of the fact that is Labour Party policy, of course, and I would fully support that. I just don't think there's a majority for it. I do think there's a majority for a sensible, pragmatic, bridge-building Brexit through the European Economic Area.
Thank you for joining us this evening. That's Labour MP for Aberavon, Stephen Kinnock.